People thought they could control him, fence off his land, and dictate what he could or couldn't do. But when the HOA tried to block his ranch, they didn't realize he had a plan that would turn the tables and make them pay for their audacity. Ethan Walker owned a large ranch that had been in his family for generations. Rolling pastures, grazing cattle, and a sprawling farmhouse made it a serene place to live and work. But over the past few months, he'd run into trouble with the local HOA. The board, led by a woman named Victoria, had begun claiming parts of his land were community easements and proceeded to build fences along the edges of his property. Ethan first noticed the construction one morning while checking the cattle. Bulldozers had carved out neat lines across the edge of his ranch, and a new chain-link fence blocked what had been the main road in and out of his property. Workers waved at him, as if they had every right to be there. "Excuse me," Ethan called out. "Who gave you permission to put up that fence?" The foreman shrugged. "We were contracted by the HOA. They said it's part of the new community project, and they own this section." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is my land. Your HOA has no right to fence it off. I've got deeds, maps, everything proves ownership. You need to stop now." The foreman looked uneasy, but repeated, "I'm just following orders." By the time Victoria herself arrived later that day, Ethan was already furious. She strutted up the driveway, clipboard in hand, ready to lecture him. "Ethan, the HOA is only enforcing rules. Part of your property is designated for shared use, and you're obstructing access. This fence is for the benefit of the community." "For the benefit of the community?" Ethan said, exasperated. "You built a fence across my private land without permission, blocked the main access road, and now claim it's for community use? That's theft, pure and simple." Victoria's tone hardened. "We have authority over this area. You should comply before this escalates further." Ethan realized words alone wouldn't solve the problem. Victoria and her HOA thrived on intimidation, and she believed she could outlast him by wearing him down. He needed a strategy that was legal, undeniable, and clever. A way to regain control of the property and turn the situation around. He started by reviewing his property deeds and boundaries. Every inch of the fenced-off section belonged to him. The HOA had overstepped their authority entirely. He contacted his attorney, who confirmed that the HOA's actions were illegal and that he had every right to remove the fences and control access to his land. But Ethan didn't stop there. He wanted a move that would not only reclaim his ranch, but also send a message to Victoria and her board. He decided to turn the only gate leading into his property into a paid toll road, a literal financial reminder that overreach comes with a cost. First, he installed a sturdy gate with a security booth. Cameras were positioned to capture every vehicle that entered and exited. He set up clear signage. Any vehicle using the road would need a pass, obtainable at the booth, with a small fee to maintain the property and compensate for unauthorized obstruction in the past. The first day of enforcement was revealing. Victoria drove up in her SUV, expecting to confront Ethan as usual. Instead, she was stopped at the gate. "I'm here to inspect the property," she said, waving her clipboard. Ethan shook his head. "This is private property. Access now requires a valid pass. You're welcome to obtain one, like everyone else." Victoria's face turned red. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." Ethan smiled faintly. "Being president doesn't give you the right to trespass. This gate ensures access is controlled and legal. If you want to enter, it comes with the same rules as anyone else." Victoria fumed, but had no legal grounds to bypass the gate. She turned her SUV around, leaving with a trail of humiliation. Word spread fast among other HOA members. Each attempt to enter the ranch without a pass was met with the same protocol. Cameras recorded every visit, providing evidence of unauthorized attempts. Residents who had once supported the HOA were now forced to confront the reality. The fences were built illegally, and the only way to access the ranch legally was through Ethan's toll gate. Some neighbors approached him, curious or concerned. "Ethan, don't you think this is extreme?" one asked. Ethan shrugged. "It's a reminder. You don't take someone's property without consequences. I'm not trying to punish anyone personally, just ensuring respect for what's mine." Within days, the toll gate became a talking point in the community. HOA members grumbled about paying to access a property they had tried to claim, and Victoria faced mounting embarrassment as the public began noticing the board's overreach. Ethan also used the opportunity to improve the ranch's security and infrastructure. The toll system funded maintenance for the road, the fence, and additional measures to prevent future encroachment. It was a practical solution that turned a conflict into a long-term safeguard. Even HOA members who had been aggressive toward him eventually had to comply with the system. Some begrudgingly paid the toll, others avoided entering altogether. Ethan had reclaimed control of his property and established a boundary that the HOA could not legally challenge. By the end of the first month, the ranch was fully secured. The fence still marked the HOA's previous overreach, but now it was a symbol of the lesson learned. Trespassing and attempting to claim what isn't yours comes at a price. Ethan watched the sunset over his pastures, satisfied. The conflict had been intense, but he had turned the situation into a victory that was both legal and strategic. Victoria had learned firsthand that property rights were not suggestions, they were enforceable. Neighbors began seeing Ethan differently. He wasn't just the quiet ranch owner. He was a man who knew his rights, could act decisively, and wouldn't be intimidated. The toll gate wasn't about money. It was about principle. And for Victoria, every attempt to bypass it was a reminder of her failure. The HOA's authority was limited, and her arrogance had been exposed. She would think twice before overstepping boundaries again. The ranch returned to peace, with cattle grazing, the lake shimmering in the afternoon sun, and Ethan's property fully under his control. Any future challenge from the HOA would be met with the same combination of law, strategy, and undeniable evidence. This wasn't just a victory for Ethan. It was a lesson for the entire community. Property rights, preparation, and patience would always win over arrogance, intimidation, and overreach. The following week, Ethan received word that Victoria was trying to rally the HOA board to challenge the toll gate. She sent letters to neighbors, posted online complaints, and even tried to get local media attention. But this time, Ethan was ready. Every document, every deed, every photo of the fence and the toll gate had been meticulously recorded. The law was clearly on his side. Victoria called a meeting at the community center, inviting board members and a few residents. She stood at the front, clearly agitated. "This gate is unfair. Ethan has no right to charge us for access." One of the neighbors, Mr. Phillips, raised his hand calmly. "Actually, Victoria, it's his land. You built fences and tried to take control without permission. Ethan is simply enforcing his rights now. The toll is on his property, so it's perfectly legal." Victoria's face turned red. "But we are the HOA. We have rules. You can't just ignore property ownership either," Ethan said, stepping forward. He spoke evenly, but there was no mistaking the authority in his voice. "Every attempt to enter the ranch without my permission is trespassing. The toll gate ensures access is legal and controlled. That's not unfair. It's enforcement of property rights." Some board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. They had supported Victoria blindly for months, but now it was clear her overreach had put them in an awkward position. Over the next few days, Ethan monitored the gate closely. Every car that approached was either properly registered and paid or turned away. Cameras captured unauthorized attempts, which he could later present as evidence if needed. The HOA tried to sneak in members to check on the fence and road, but Ethan's system was foolproof. Each attempt was documented and reported to local authorities when necessary. Victoria, desperate, decided to test him directly. She drove her SUV toward the gate one morning, expecting to argue her way through. "Stop," Ethan called from the booth. "This is private property. You need a valid pass to enter." "This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president," she shouted, waving her hands. Ethan shook his head. "Your position does not grant you the right to trespass. You may apply for a pass like everyone else, or turn around. It's that simple." Victoria sputtered in disbelief. The cameras captured every expression, every word, and even the local officer who happened to be patrolling later commented that she was clearly in the wrong. Defeated, she finally drove away, grumbling under her breath. The toll system also had a surprising effect on the neighborhood. Residents who had previously avoided Ethan's ranch out of fear of conflict now respected the clear boundaries. Some paid to enter for recreational purposes, while others chose to stay on their own properties. The lake, pastures, and roads remained peaceful, with no unauthorized intrusions. Ethan even used part of the toll revenue to improve the ranch for the benefit of neighbors who followed the rules. He repaired the main road, installed better lighting along paths, and added small picnic areas for authorized visitors. By doing so, he showed that his actions were fair, lawful, and aimed at maintaining order, not simply punishing the HOA. Victoria, meanwhile, was becoming a cautionary tale. Her repeated attempts to control Ethan's property had not only failed, but had exposed her to public scrutiny. Neighbors began questioning her judgment and authority. Some quietly admitted that they had always thought Ethan was right, and Victoria had overstepped repeatedly. One afternoon, a group of board members approached Ethan. "We need to talk," said Mr. Reynolds, the vice president. "We realize the fence was built without permission, and the toll gate, well, it's your right. Victoria's actions were out of line, and we'd like to make amends." Ethan nodded calmly. "I appreciate that. The goal is not to create conflict, but to ensure property rights are respected. The gate is here to protect the ranch, and that protection extends to the community as well. Cooperation makes everything smoother for everyone." The board agreed to stop interfering entirely. They dismantled any remaining attempts to use the ranch illegally, and Victoria was warned that further violations could result in legal action. Her credibility took a serious hit, and she eventually resigned from the board under pressure. With the HOA effectively neutralized, Ethan had finally restored control over his ranch. The toll gate continued to operate, not as a means of profit, but as a clear demonstration that his land could not be taken lightly. It became a symbol of boundaries and lawful authority. Word spread about the incident, and Ethan received support from neighbors and local authorities. People admired the way he had handled the situation, calmly, strategically, and legally. He hadn't resorted to threats or physical confrontation. He had used the law, clear documentation, and a clever solution to assert his rights. Over the following months, the ranch returned to its peaceful routine. Cattle grazed quietly, the lake shimmered in the sunlight, and the only traffic through the gate was authorized. Ethan occasionally waved at neighbors, entering legally, happy to see that respect for boundaries had been established. Victoria's story, by contrast, became a lesson in overreach. Her attempts to intimidate, control, and manipulate ended in embarrassment and public scrutiny. She realized too late that authority is meaningless without respect for the law, and that underestimating someone like Ethan, calm, informed, and prepared, can backfire spectacularly. The community also learned from the ordeal. Homeowners realized that HOA boards have limits, and property rights cannot be overridden simply by loud complaints, letters, or fences. Ethan's approach highlighted that preparedness, evidence, and lawful action are more powerful than intimidation. Ethan reflected on the entire conflict. The fence, the toll gate, the confrontations. They had tested his patience and resolve, but the outcome was satisfying. He had defended his property, restored order, and ensured that anyone who tried to challenge him in the future would think twice. By the end of the year, Ethan's ranch was thriving. The toll gate had become a routine part of life, accepted by those who followed the rules and respected the land. Victoria and her former board members had moved on. Their influence diminished. Ethan's family could enjoy the property without fear of illegal interference, and the community had learned an unforgettable lesson about respecting boundaries and ownership. In the end, the story wasn't just about a gate or a fence. It was about knowledge, preparation, and the courage to stand up to overreach. Ethan had turned an illegal action against him into a legal, effective, and even beneficial solution. The ranch, once threatened, was now more secure than ever, and the lesson was clear. When someone tries to take what's yours, respond wisely, strategically, and decisively, and always let the law back you up.